All right, we are recording. So welcome to the meeting tonight, the Energy Committee meeting, January 20th. Tonight we have one item on the agenda, and that is to have a presentation from Green Peak Solar on their project for the the Lathrop Plateau, just south of town. And we're going to go ahead and begin with the presentation. So
Great.
you're on.
Well, thank you everybody for taking the time to chat with us tonight. I'm Nathaniel Vandal. Chris Cadwell is also on. We're the co-owners of Green Peak Solar. We're a Vermont-based solar energy and energy storage developer. I live in Waitsfield and Chris lives in Pittsford. And we're here tonight to talk to you guys about the project that we've been proposing on the Lathrop property at the top of Cane Hill Road. We're actually proposing a 2.2 megawatt AC solar energy project, as well as a battery energy storage project. We've provided the select board, the planning commission, and the energy committee with copies of a notice, an advance notice, basically giving our intention to file a certificate of public good petition with the PUC. There's a lot of information in that filing, and we just wanted to take the opportunity to, talk through any questions that you have. And really, the purpose of where we're at in this whole process is to, engage with folks from the community, so that if there's any feedback that can be incorporated into our certificate of public good petition, the intention is to try to capture that feedback now. So we find that it's often best to kind of keep these things somewhat informal and quick. So I don't want to take you through a super long presentation, but we did just want to explain one thing that's a little bit different about this project is that we're proposing single axis tracker technology for the solar project. Fundamentally, it's pretty similar to what you see, around Vermont with fixed tilt solar. However, the difference is that the rows, instead of being oriented east to west, are oriented south, and they rotate from east to west during the day. And we do that so that we can basically optimize the energy production from the panels to capture as much as possible. And so by having that diurnal rotation throughout the day, we're able to track the sun a little more closely, and we get anywhere from 10 to 15% extra energy over your traditional fixed tilt energy system. So we have some photos of what that looks like. It's probably going to look pretty familiar to what you've seen, but we just wanted to show you that. So Chris, I don't know if you want to kind of cruise through some of these slides while we're talking.
Sure. Can you see my screen? Yep. Now it says screen sharing is paused, but is that not the case? You can paused. Okay, so can you see this photograph? No.
No.
Sally, is there anything that you can do to unpause my screen sharing, or is that on my?
Maybe try to stop again.
Okay, I'm gonna try again.
So bear with me. Proposing, which I could talk about while we're pulling this up, is we're proposing using what's called a bifacial panel. So traditionally, solar panels have had they have the cells that convert the sunlight into electrical energy. And in the past couple of years, what we've seen is an emergence in, so basically the cells are sandwiched between a glass top sheet that lets the sunlight through and a back sheet. So the traditional panels were only absorbing energy from one side of the cell. With bifacial, which is a relatively recent, I wouldn't call it, I would call it a mature technology at this point, but it's somewhat new. I would imagine there's only a handful of projects in Vermont that are using it currently. But basically there's a glass sheet on the top and the bottom of the solar panel, so that you're able to capture light that bounces off the ground on the bottom of the solar panel. And that combined with the tracker is especially beneficial for snow, because the tracker can go all the way to 6, which is a much better angle to shed snow off of. And with that glass back sheet able to collect energy off of the snow on the bottom, it's able to get some current running through the module with snow on top, which helps it to shed snow. So basically the net is we're really trying to design a system that's most efficient that we can possibly design for the conditions in Vermont, and that's cost effective. And the reason for that is that this project participates in the standard offer program with the state of Vermont, which is an RFP that's run every year. And really the goal of that RFP is to try to find the lowest cost solar in the state. And so this project was one of a few projects that was awarded, but we were actually the lowest priced project in the state, kind of setting the benchmark for the 2020 RFP pricing. So we're really trying to optimize that energy production to get the cost as low as possible to ratepayers. So Chris can flip through a couple more of these.
So, yeah, this is the drone photo of a 2.2 megawatt project. So a similar size project. And you can see that because it's a view looking southwest, that the rows are oriented north-south, as Nathaniel said. So in the morning, they'll face the sun, and in the evening they will. And that's why you get more generation from them. This is that same project, but from a bird's eye view looking straight down. And then this is a little bit of a closer view. You can see that each row is run by a motor in the middle, and that's what is tracking it back and forth. And then this last picture is a battery storage project, and each of these containers, the white refrigerator looking things inside that fence contains lithium ion batteries that are liquid cooled and really operate very similarly to your cell phone battery, but are just stacked in sequence to create a much larger capacity and energy. So if there's one of these pictures you want to see again, I'd be happy to go back to it, or specific questions, would be happy to answer them.
I'm a little bit confused about the tracking. If I'm looking at these, is each individual panel able to track left and right, for example?
Yes.
Or do they go up and down?
Looking at
Left and right.
The rows only track. Looking at this photo would be like left to right.
Okay, you were mentioning, Nathaniel, that it sounded like they could tilt back.
Yeah, so
talking about the snow issue.
right. So in this photo, they are tilted. You can see how that row is tilted at maybe
East.
5 degrees to the east.
Okay.
If it were later in the day, if you can imagine, there's a torque tube that runs down the middle of these rows, and all of those panels that are on that row will rotate together with the sun very, very slowly. You can hear the motor make a little bit of a noise when they rotate, but you could barely perceive that they're moving. So if you were to take this same photo, but it were to be in the afternoon, the actual orientation of the tilt of those rows would be to the right, as opposed to not facing to the left.
Okay, thank you.
So it's a relatively rudimentary technology, honestly, but it what you're really trying to solve for is cost of energy. And the trackers, like you see from All Earth Renewables in Vermont, or there's another one, SolarFlect, that that are the sort of square looking arrays on a single post. That's a dual axis tracker that tracks both the sun's position over the latitude and azimuth. Those are terrific. Those are the most efficient tracker. But from when you're doing a larger project like this from a cost-effective basis, we're able to deliver a lower cost of energy with this technology than with a dual axis tracker. And we're also able to reduce the height quite a bit. So the nice thing about these trackers is that you're not really exceeding the height of a typical fixed tilt tracker. Whereas when you go to a dual axis tracker, the height of the tracker is substantially higher. Any other questions about these slides or any of that? Cool. So, Sally, I know you shared a couple of other questions, which we're hoping just to kind of run through and then open up to anything else you guys would have. But I think one of the first questions you shared was, it appears that the electricity generated will go directly to GMP with no option for individual or community buy-in. Is that correct? So that is correct with a slight nuance. Because this is a state-run RFP, the energy actually goes to all of the utilities in the state of Vermont, not just GMP. GMP happens to be 80%. GMP serves 80% of the customers, roughly 80% of the customers in Vermont. So about 80% of the energy will go to GMP, but each of the utilities will get a portion of the energy from the project. And that's just the fact that it's a state-run program. But it is correct that there's no option for individual or community buy-in. And that's because basically this project is operating really like a wholesale project where it's selling the power to the utility directly. And that's becoming part of the utility's power mix. Net metering, where there's community buy-in or options, that's where customers basically become a member, become part of a project. And that's reducing their load specifically, or it's supplanting their load with solar energy from a specific project. This is operating kind of on the wholesale level for the composite Vermont system. So it's still doing the same amount of solar power generated. It's just a slightly different program, if you will, that it operates in. For us, we're really excited about it because the cost is so much lower for a larger project like this. I mean, we're able to deliver energy. This project is below 9 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's really some of the lowest priced solar power in the state, which we're really excited about. I guess the next question was, will it also generate revenue for the town of Bristol via property taxes? The answer to that is yes, absolutely. The rough calculations based on the PPA rate are that it'll generate around $12,000 a year in additional property taxes. That's in addition to the land as it's already being taxed. And that's just the municipal portion of the taxes. That's just what would come to Bristol. There's a state capacity tax that's the education fund that we're all familiar with. That's a separate tax rate. There's a state statute for what solar projects have to pay for the education fund, but just for the town of Bristol, it's around $12,000 a year, which will which will change based on what happens with the Bristol tax rate. So kind of roughly speaking, if the tax rate increases by 2% per year, which is kind of the general number we would use, it would be about $380,000 of taxes over the life of the project, which is 25 years. That's just the solar project. The battery energy storage project would be in addition to that. But to be totally honest, because the battery energy storage projects are somewhat newer in the way that they're taxed from a municipal tax basis is more complicated and less certain. I would anticipate that the battery taxes would be on that kind of same order of magnitude. But it's just, whereas there's a very prescriptive methodology to come up with the solar valuation for the grand list. It's less cut and dry for a battery energy storage project. But combined, I would anticipate the projects to contribute anywhere from, you know, $17,000 to, you know, $25,000 additional revenue to the town. Let's see, jumping back to the questions.
Wait a second. Oh, Stephen, did you have a question?
Yes, I was just hoping you could clarify a little bit how school tax or the education taxes are handled differently.
Yeah, so the education taxes are basically there's a fixed price per kilowatt that the state has determined for solar projects. So it's $4 a kilowatt. So it'd be $8,800 a year for the state portion of the taxes. And that's a statute that goes back to, I don't know, a while now. 2014, maybe 2015 or so.
So that $8,800 would benefit the state. Is that what you're saying? And
yes.
not Bristol directly.
Not Bristol directly, correct.
Okay.
It's like indirectly, I suppose.
Sure.
The school would have some benefit, but I mean,
Yep.
Admittedly, you know, the municipal tax rates, I don't remember what Bristol is, probably 0.5% or so. You know, usually the education rate is 1.7%. So there's definitely part of that state tax bill was to say, let's simplify this and make it more cost effective for solar projects.
Yeah.
So there's definitely, you know, that's a disproportionate balance. But I think the state was saying, let's make sure the municipalities get the municipal portion for these projects.
Right.
We'll kind of work out the education portion. The nice thing with these projects is that they're generally very low. Not generally, they are extremely low on their municipal burden. So there's no kids going to school, from a, we're not going to need town water at all. We really don't need any services from the town. From a fire perspective, really if there's any emergencies, it's keep people, outside of the fence, away from the projects, and, let them go. We don't want anybody, interfering and getting hurt. Extremely, extremely rare that would ever happen, but really there's really no burden on the town, so to speak, from these projects. So, a lot of communities are pretty excited about that additional tax revenue. So if anybody has any questions there, I'm happy to talk further. Otherwise,
Richard?
Yeah, so some of these first couple questions were mine, and I'm certainly satisfied with the answers. When we were talking with Chris Bray, I guess it was the last meeting, one of the things he pointed out in answer to a question of mine regarding the difference between what you're calling wholesale and community solar is essentially wholesale benefits all ratepayers with cheaper electricity. And that really made an impression on me. And so I think that's what we see happening here. You're going to be contributing to lowering the electric cost across the whole grid. Is that correct?
yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And whereas with net metering, I mean, even with net metering, it's kind of a complicated situation, because even with net metering, most net metering projects, the renewable energy credits are going to the utility. And so the actual renewableness of the project is being kind of spread out through the state, theoretically. But really what it means is that people that can participate in that project, their electricity bill is being reduced. But, you know, the person right next door who didn't participate in the project, their electricity bill isn't being reduced.
Right.
So in this case, we're actually, you know, just selling power to the utility at a much lower rate, and they're turning around and reselling that. And that cost is really just a pass through for the utility from these programs. So it's, to me, it's a really equitable framework to allow more renewables onto the system. And I think I'm a believer in renewables, obviously. And, you know, we've done net metering projects with, you know, we have a project with the town of Williamstown High School and a project with the town of Springfield. And it's really great to be able to reduce their energy needs specifically with, you know, very specific projects. But I also, you know, anything in power, there's always transfers, you know. I grew up at the end of a mile-long road, and we're the only house at the end of it. And trees fall on that road a heck of a lot more than where my wife grew up in Shelburne, you know, which is probably underground power, right? So there's always a transfer of, you know, who pays for what and when we socialize electricity costs. But I really believe that the standard offer program is a really good way to get renewables onto the system really equitably. Cool, I'll keep cruising. So that goes back to the environmental attributes, the RECs. So under our contract with the, so I'll read the question actually, just so I don't. Can the electricity and or the environmental attributes be marketed out of state? So the answer to that is that under our contract, the environmental attributes and the electricity all go to the state and all the composite utilities in the state. The state has the Renewable Energy Standard statute, which requires utilities to purchase certain portions of their electricity from renewables, including in-state renewables. I can't say for certain whether or not the standard offer renewable energy credits generated from standard offer are required to be retired, or whether if a utility has excess credits in a given year, they could sell them out of state. But I believe that in practice, all of these are going towards satisfying that renewable energy standard. That renewable energy standard is really dictated by statute. I know there was some discussion, for example, with some of the larger wind farms that the utilities buy energy from. There can be some years where if they're trying to meet a renewable energy standard that's kind of going up gradually and they buy in chunks, there was always this discussion of like, well, what happens if we have excess renewable energy credits? Can we sell them out of state? I don't believe the utilities are allowed to sell the RECs from these projects out of state, but ultimately that's the statute governs that. From our perspective, they're being sold directly to the state and a portion to the utilities. And I think that, as I said before, in practice, the utilities are much more, their procurement is really following the requirements of the renewable energy standard much more closely. And I think that practice of selling renewable energy credits out of state has really decreased since the enactment of that law. And apologize, that's kind of a complicated answer, but it's a messy and quite complicated. The whole construct is not easy to wrap your head around. Okay, and then the last question was, would the electricity generated apply to Bristol's 90 by 50 goal? And I think the answer to that is, absolutely. This is really, I think that Bristol's goal is in keeping with, the state's 90 by 50 goal. This is by supporting this project or hosting this project, the town of Bristol would really, I think, be, furthering its mission for the 95 by 50 goals. And, while electricity would be going to everybody in the state, it would really, I think it would be a pretty terrific thing for the town of Bristol to have a power plant that's really probably equivalent to, a lot of what, most of what that substation is serving on a baseload basis to be generated, locally. And I think that the energy storage project is also a really, while that's not really explicitly fleshed out in the 90 by 50 goal, I think that energy storage is going to be a really huge component as to how you get there. And I think that really helps to, I think that helps as well. So anyway, those are the questions that Sally had emailed. If there's any, happy to open the floor up to any other questions or dive in.
Stephen, did you have a question?
I'm curious, how much energy is the project expected or anticipated to generate in a year? Did we just meet our 2050 goal?
Let me do a little math. Going in the kilowatt hours?
Yeah, kilowatt hours, or megawatt hours.
So we were given the towns have been given a dashboard, and there's a target that each town is supposed to meet in terms of energy savings, energy generation, and so on by a variety of means. And some of it could be, 50% of the town is on heat pumps. But another part of it is greatly increasing either rooftop solar or this kind of project within the town. And there was I can't remember what it is, but there's a goal in each of the target periods. And I guess that's more what I was asking about. And I suspect the answer is yes.
Well, if you send us the dashboard, we can help you fit this project into it. We did a quick Google of the 90 by 50, but I don't know if we're talking about the same one that you are.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I'm not familiar with the dashboard, but certainly the 50 in the energy plan this would be right in line with it. Yeah, so we're this would generate around called 4.5 this is 4.5 million kilowatt hours, so 4,500 megawatt hours per year.
Okay, so I just pulled up, I didn't have the terminology right. It's the 2021 Energy Scorecard for Bristol, Vermont. It has 4 segments: thermal energy use, electrical energy use, transportation energy use, and renewable generation, electricity generation. And I'll just scroll down real quick. Renewable energy generation, it says that we need 7,665 megawatt hours by 2025. Right now, we have something a little bit less than 2,000, if I'm reading this right. So we need to generate, in order to make the 2025 in this quadrant, 3,943 megawatt hours. Does that make any sense? This is to meet the target.
So I think, we would be at about 4,500 megawatt hours.
Oh, wow. Okay. So we're moving along with this. So that would take us closer to 2035.
I guess I'm kind of curious about what are in fact, or how are we in fact counting these renewable energy credits? And it sounds like maybe, is anyone really sure that, I don't know enough about it. I apologize. I haven't read the plan, the enhanced energy plan, and I don't know who knows how these are going to be evaluated, these energy plans.
I
Does
mean,
anybody know? 'Cause I don't.
well, I mean, my understanding was when we were beginning to work on the enhanced energy plan was, looking what the whole state needs and then breaking it into counties and then towns and how much they would need to contribute. And, so they come up with numbers like that to say, and maybe it depends on what kind of sites different towns have available to what's most likely. I'm not really sure, but so actually I don't know the answer, but I know that, they've done a general figuring out of basically this is what we need to do. And if Bristol doesn't make it, but another town does, like Panton or the ones that have a lot of solar space, then it all balances out in the long run. It's not like people are going to get, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to get a fee for not making it, but the idea is to try to make it so that, just an idea to give people some enthusiasm around making projects happen so that we can, as a state, make it.
It seems like this one plus the solar landfill project, Solar 3.
Yeah.
Will definitely count toward that,
Definitely.
toward that target. I don't know if you'd call them aspirational, because they're going to be hard to determine. For example, they go by on transportation, how many electric vehicles do we have in the town? And how many more, if we had how many more, how much would that get us closer to this goal? So I think it's more aspirational. So the question was, it sort of answers itself, I think. I think your project certainly does
Totally.
enhance that.
I don't
Hugely.
understand that. I don't see it, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. We can move on. Only because the town of Bristol isn't hosting this project. A property owner's hosting the project. And frankly, the town of Bristol doesn't really have a lot of say over whether or not this happens.
I think, Steve, it would be analogous to if rooftop solar owned by individuals counts, then this would also count. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I think
I don't know. The benefits of the project are going, they're spread out pretty thin. If they're going statewide versus if they're on our own rooftops, they're going straight to our residents.
Well, the interesting thing about that is that even rooftop solar, the renewable energy credits for net metering are going to the utility directly to meet a state goal. So even
Right, so we're talking about different things, I guess, than if we're talking about what the utility can claim or does claim versus what the town of Bristol can claim as progress towards our aspirational goal.
Yeah, I think maybe the accounting of like the renewable piece of it and the accounting of the electricity is like this weird sort of theoretical construct on top of what's physical reality.
Yeah, I know.
So that's where it gets really complicated. But I think kind of at a fundamental level, I think what those goals and what those community dashboards are trying to do is so that when planners or energy committees are writing your enhanced energy plans to think about, renewable energy, is trying to give a guideline for if you guys are going to participate in the state, you're going to be a community that's participating and like supporting the state goals. This is how much energy each of these communities needs to have. I think your point is spot on that is Bristol really hosting it, or the landowner, or, it's complicated, but I think the kind of purpose is to say planning committees or energy committees, this is like what your energy, this is what your community uses. And if you want to kind of internalize your portion of that renewable energy, make sure your energy plans allow for the, this much capacity to be in your town or your community.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I don't mean to cast any doubt on the benefits of the project from a society standpoint. But as you yourself said, Nathaniel, there are always trade-offs when there are energy projects.
Yep.
Sometimes they have to do with natural resources, sometimes they have to do with wildlife, sometimes they have to do with all sorts of different things. And my concern is not whether or not we should be doing solar. I'm absolutely 100% for solar. But as a resident of Lincoln, as a resident here, and I'm okay, so I'll take off my hat as an energy committee guy for a second.
Mm-hmm.
That's a prime piece of real estate. In fact, the town's own enhanced energy plan doesn't list it among preferred sites for energy production. I don't know if you guys were aware of that, but there's a lot of Bristol's future has lots of needs. And if we build something there, not that, again, I don't know how much say we have about it, but whoops, sorry. It precludes other things that could be done with that the town also needs, right in the core, right in the village. So please don't get me wrong. I'm in favor of solar power 100%, but I think that we do need to be aware that there are trade-offs. And I think maybe it's more of a planning issue, because as an energy committee member, of course I'm in favor of solar generally.
Yeah, so that's an interesting, I hadn't necessarily interpreted the energy plan to suggest that wasn't a preferred site. It's definitely in the village planning. I forget what the village planning area or the
village plan
Yeah,
area,
so
but it's definitely
within-
not in, it's not in, I couldn't find in the document what they mean by village planning area. I didn't see that, except that it seems to me like it's something that would take into account the needs of the village, all sorts of needs of the village. And the site is definitely not part of the areas spelled out as preferred energy areas. Again, I'm not trying to advocate or say I'm not in favor of the project. I'm just saying these are some of the trade-offs.
Yeah, so I guess I could tell you what when we cited the project, why we chose that parcel over other parcels is one, it's pretty close to the Hewitt Road substation.
No, I understand.
You have to be relatively close. So of other areas that are also close to the Hewitt Road substation, there's floodplain from the New Haven River, which takes out some of the area like back behind Johnson and kind of on that flat. And then really the other options that are probably more viable or that are close to that substation would be, the pieces of land right near kind of the Four Corners, where I don't know if they still sell fish there on Wednesdays or whatever it was. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that Four Corners.
Yeah.
And for us, the aesthetic impact of having a project right in one of those fields at the Four Corners is
I understand. I
much
understand.
more concerned about. So
Yep, it's near three-phase power, it's near substation. I understand
we were-
all those reasons for doing solar there. I do understand them. Yeah,
yeah, so I'm just trying to give some context to, what, like, we often go through kind of that planning process ourselves to try to find sites.
yeah,
And we're really looking at all those criteria. And for us, what really attracted us to this project was how it's close to the load center, which is really good electrically, but it's also in a location that, I've driven by that field for 20 years, and I wasn't even really aware it was there
yeah. Oh, I know.
a couple years ago. So that's kind of a lot of the process that we've thought about as we've considered it.
I've been thinking about the, also, the thing with the solar project is it is not destructive to the land, really. I mean, at the end of it, say 25 years or whatever it is, and it is disassembled or they put the field back to where it was, then it can be used for something else. Whereas in the old days of thinking about having it be a gravel pit, it really would have ruined the area for anything forever. Whereas a solar project is a more of a temporary thing, possibly. So that's another thing, like it could be an incredible housing place built 30 years from now or some other thing. So it could be just part of one of the many things that that space is used for. I just want to bring that point up.
Good point.
Yeah, and we will, as part of the certificate of public good requirement, we'll have to post a bond, or that's not a bond, it's actually an irrevocable standby letter of credit from a highly rated financial institution, basically, such that if the project were to ever be, go belly up and cease to exist, the state would actually hold a letter of credit that they could draw upon that would cover the cost of removal and decommissioning. So there's kind of an insurance policy, if you will, that at the end of the project life, it'll be removed and restored to a standard.
It'd be great to have more people on this to ask more questions, actually, now that I think of it. But we're getting some good questions and throwing some ideas out here. Any other questions?
I'm good. Yeah.
Let's see. How does this help Bristol with like resilience around electricity? Is that something that, I mean, would the battery storage be helpful that way, or is it just, or not really? Once the grid's down, it's down. We couldn't really get power. It's pretty much tied with the grid, right?
Yeah, so what the use of the battery as like a standalone generation source is called like a microgrid or islanding, they call it. To my knowledge, I don't believe Green Mountain Power has actually implemented a microgrid or like on a regional basis like this for a circuit. It becomes pretty difficult. I know they were talking about doing that in Panton and at some other projects they have developed, but I think that in speaking with some of the folks at GMP, the technical challenges of islanding a system with a battery are really complicated.
Yeah.
So I would say, generally, unless you're right next to a load specifically, it's really hard to island a system like this.
Yeah.
So from a resiliency perspective, I don't think that would be the benefit. what the benefit is that, you know, each of these, the Vermont system, as well as the, you know, that substation, frankly, and all the feeders off of it, they have their own, you know, peak energy time. And so transmission and distribution planners, all of our energy needs are sized around the peak. It's kind of like with a truck, you know, if you're going to tow a trailer and you want to, you know that that's going to weigh 10,000 pounds, then you need to buy a truck that can tow 10,000 pounds, right? So they even if you don't do that, you know, you do it once a year, you need the 10,000 pound truck. That's the way system planners and distribution planners look at the electricity grid, is I need to be able to serve this load. So when you incorporate a battery into that mix, what you're doing is you're helping to shave that load off and reduce it and try to flatten it out. So when it comes time to look at what the needs are on the transmission system, what the needs are for how much energy do we have to have kind of on reserve, it's called capacity. By reducing that peak load, it's really helping with the resiliency, because we're not our needs. We no longer need that 10,000 pound towing capacity truck. We can get away with a smaller truck. Doing so, we don't have to have as much electrical infrastructure, as much generation, as much of you know, of that all kind of on standby, waiting for that one day a year when we want to tow the 10,000 pound trailer. So it's, you know, is this battery going to keep the lights on in Bristol when there's an outage? Probably not. But will this battery reduce the peak load for that circuit and for the Vermont system as an overall? You know, absolutely. And we all pay, in addition to just the sort of resilience of reducing that peak load, a large portion of what we as Vermont ratepayers pay is for the poles and wires, not just from Green Mountain Power, but from Velco and from the New England ISO as a whole. And the way that those poles and wires charges are portioned is based on your peak load. So by reducing the peak load, we're reducing ratepayers' costs. So it's, you know, with the utility, you know, a lot of people's impetus to do things is economic. And the reason for battery is compelling for a lot of reasons, but, you know, you better believe that there's economics behind why GMP would, you know, has interest in these batteries, is because they want to reduce the amount that they have to pay to the New England ISO for capacity and transmission charges. Well, I hope that answered the question, but.
Yeah. I think we're probably all set.
Yeah, okay.
Sally? Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds good.
Yeah.
Just as a matter, just out of curiosity, what's the process? I know that the application is now in with the PUC.
So what's been filed right now is the 45-day notice. So, you know, as I mentioned before, like the purpose of this this sort of 45-day period before we file the actual petition is really to have conversations like this, so that we can incorporate, you know, any feedback you guys would have on the project. A lot of times that feedback tends to be more around aesthetic mitigation.
Right.
In other words, like, people like feedback. What feedback are we going to give? You know, we like the project or we don't. Well, a lot of times what it comes down to is like, you know, hey, can you plant a row of trees here? You know, that's something like, those are the kinds of adjustments we make. In this case, there's not a lot of, like, it's pretty well screened naturally and pretty well out of view. That's kind of the most common thing, but certainly, like, any, I mean, we're happy to, you know, when we we sent a letter out to all the abutting landowners, and we offered to meet folks on site to, answer any questions they had. And unfortunately, none of the other landowners came up, but Sally did come up and speak with us, and we met a gentleman who's used to live on that parcel of land and worked for Mr. Lathrop for a very long time. And he expressed his interest in, using that land as access. And so, that's the kind of thing we can incorporate into our design, is to make sure that we have, a perimeter around our fence that wouldn't prohibit people from being able to, to walk around the project, to access the mountain or the woods, or, even the meadow itself at the outside of the project. So those are the kinds of things that, the 45-day notice is really geared towards, fostering. So, that's where we're at now. There's opportunities to file comments, now, and then we'll be submitting the 45-day notice, or we'll be submitting the actual formal certificate of public good petition. Basically, I think it's late February, is our anticipated timeframe. We're trying to get it in sooner, just so that we have an opportunity to construct the project this year, if we can get through the permitting relatively quickly. But once we're in that certificate of public good process, that's another 6 months typically to go through. And that's the process there is, that's basically there's the PUC, it's a proceeding. It's basically treated like a legal proceeding. People have some people have statutory rights to kind of as interveners in that process, who can file testimony, basically, say how they think about the project or what they want the project to do or change. So a lot of times, for example, with the Agency of Natural Resources, they're a statutory party to our proceeding. So the Agency of Natural Resources, we already know, we've shared with them the results of all our environmental studies. Generally, the site is extremely clean. There's no environmental resources or rare, threatened, endangered species. But in order to bring the power up the hill, we will have to clear a narrow swath of trees. And the Agency of Natural Resources has said, if you want to cut a tree with a 12 dBH diameter breast height, you need to do that in the winter time, so that you don't kill any bats, endangered bats, Indiana bats. So that's the kind of thing they'll intervene in that proceeding, and that will eventually be incorporated as a stipulation to our certificate of public good. So that process takes like 6 months, depending on if it's contested or not. There can be rounds of discovery where the different parties will ask us questions. Generally, we try to agree with everybody, so that, especially that, again, we'll go into it. We know that A&R wants us to have that cutting restriction on trees. We'll just say in our petition, we're willing to do this, and that can help to kind of smooth out the schedule. But the site visit, that's part of the formal Section 248 process. There can be rounds of discovery, if that's requested or not. And then the PUC will kind of review all of the, quote, facts of the case, and they'll come up with a determination as to whether or not the project meets the public good. Does that answer your question? Or any specifics I can?
No, that's great. Thanks.
Cool.
Thoroughly.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that since you're buying the land, you will be the ones who own the land at the end of the decommissioning.
That's correct.
And then what you do with that after that is, yeah, it's up to you. But if you knew what the town might want, and you are interested in creating something that they liked, then you could work with the town with something. I mean, who knows? Anything. The sky's the limit at that point, I guess.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Generally, our hope is that the design life of these projects exceeds 25 years.
Mhm.
We'd like to, generally we want to try to give the project as much opportunity to function for its full design life. After 25 years, it'll be paid off. The contract with the utility will be gone. Who knows if it'll be, hopefully at that point it's competing against newer and even cheaper renewables, and it's, selling for a fraction of what it is today, because that's what the cost of electricity is in the future. But generally, we know these things have a longer design life. So we tend to try to make sure that we're not hampering the ability for the project to continue to run for, other 5-10 years,
Yeah.
if it can, or be repowered. But yeah, to your point, certainly there's, what happens afterwards is, the sky is the limit. I mean, generally, I'm, it's always an interesting one. It's like, I'm not really pro development, but I'm a developer, and that's the paradigm I live in. And, Chris does, we appreciate open spaces. That's definitely a beautiful piece of land. It's just funny to think about, in 5 years, 10 years, or 25 years would I ever want to see that go into 1 acre subdivisions? I don't know. Maybe if that's what the need is, but it's always an interesting,
Yeah.
something I struggle with, I guess.
Yeah. We definitely need affordable housing for sure. And it's always nice to have some good ag land. Another question I wanted to ask is, for underneath the panels, you usually mow, or do you put something under there that doesn't need mowing? How's that going with people figuring out how to plant underneath it without having to mow?
Not great. You pretty much have to mow, or in some cases people have been able to graze sheep.
Mhm.
That's an exciting opportunity.
Yeah.
Depending on who the financing party is.
Yeah.
Some banks are okay with sheep, some aren't. So it's one of those things that's like, I think that I love to see sheep in these projects.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that's really hard to kind of promise, because you don't know what the lender is going to be allow or not.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of is people, which we can commit to, is pollinator friendly plantings. And then there are local groups that are, actually using, the fact that there's a fence around the project as a benefit to being able to keep hives inside of a fenced area that's secure, and have pollinator friendly grasses. But typically, I would say, 90% of projects are mown usually once, in some cases twice a year. And that's just, a reality.
That's pretty reasonable though,
I have
that
to,
if you only have to do it once or twice.
yeah, we try to keep the mowing to a minimum as much as possible.
Yeah.
It's expensive. It uses fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And if it's not necessary, it's not necessary.
Yeah. We have a local guy who's doing electric mowing as a landscaping job, and who knows, maybe he'd mow it for you with electric mower.
Cool.
Yeah,
Very cool.
it's Bear Mountain Mowing. All right, well, thanks so much for coming in and sharing. This has been great to
Thank you
know more
all.
about it.
Great. Well, you have contact information. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out at any time. If it's useful for us to come back on, we're happy to do that as always. We are likely, I think, assuming the select board is interested, I think going to be, we had a really quick kind of introduction to the select board a few weeks ago. Now that they have the 45-day information packet, I think we're planning to go back in front of them, assuming they're still interested and have time for us. But we'll certainly let you guys know when that date is if you want to join in to that as well. And as I said, you know, anything really, if, you know, we're just here to answer any questions and talk through any issues folks have. So please feel free to be in touch.
Yep.
Thank you.
Hey,
Great, thank you very much.
yeah, thank you so much. Jim, I didn't ask you if you wanted to ask questions, but you're welcome to ask anytime too. We're pretty casual here.
If I had one, I would ask.
Okay, great. Excellent.
Not
right.
a problem.
Great. Thank you
Thank
so
you much.
much.
Well, have a great night, everybody.
All right, you too.
You too.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
again. Bye.
So that was enjoyable to be able to learn more and understand more and ask questions. I appreciate that.
Is the town looking for a recommendation from us?
I don't know, but we could talk about that, and they might. I mean, that's been the deal in the past with other energy projects. I know that the town administrator told us, hey, why don't any energy products just go to the energy committee first, figure it all out, and then come to us and let us know if you think it's worth looking into, so that they don't have to do all that, you know? And so it probably would be helpful, but I don't really know. Do you want to talk about that at this point, if we want to recommend it or not? Or do we want to learn more or think about it more? We have 4 of us here. I believe if John is still here. Yep, he is.
I guess my sense is, as an energy committee, if something like this comes to us, we should at least follow precedent or set precedent.
Yeah.
With a recommendation. I would move that we indicate a favorable response to the select board.
Yeah.
That's up to the rest of the committee, but I think it's a good project.
Well, does anyone want to second that? Or is there discussion first? I think there's second it. And then we
Second
can
and then discussion.
okay,
yeah.
so does anyone want to
Yeah.
second that motion?
I'll second it. John McCormick seconds it.
Okay, thanks, John. Would anyone like to discuss that motion? Hearing no
I
discussion.
guess I would be,
Stephen was.
Go ahead.
I guess I would be, I think, first of all, I don't know whether anything is expected of us. Second of all, I think we should be clear about what we're saying when we say favorable. We should be more specific than just saying we reviewed this favorably. I think we should be more clear about how we perceive this benefiting Bristol residents from an energy standpoint.
Okay.
Because that's what we do on the Energy Committee, is we evaluate projects for how they benefit or don't benefit our citizens, our residents. I mean, I think it would be notable that it doesn't fall in a preferred location that we ourselves have promulgated. So favorable, I guess, I think should be fleshed out. I'm not opposed to the project, but I do think we should be clear.
Okay.
So let me read one sentence from this energy plan. Let me get this down. The energy scorecard for Bristol, Vermont. Enhanced energy plan status passed by the Planning Commission and Select Board at 2020 on town meeting day ballot. With passage of the enhanced energy plan, the town of Bristol will agree to work towards achieving regional and state energy goals, including the target of having 90% of the energy used in Vermont obtained through renewable sources by 2050. This document provides a status report. So I guess I would say, to be more specific, that I believe this project is very definitely supports the objectives of the enhanced energy plan. I would, if we want a more specific motion, my motion to the select board would be, having reviewed this with the information we have now, we believe that this will further the goals of the enhanced energy plan.
I hear what you're saying, Richard, and I also heard what Stephen said, and I think it's worth thinking about that fact. I recall when I was working in the beginning on the, so I just want to answer kind of Stephen's thing about the preference area, and that is, I recall in the beginning looking at all that information, the maps and everything. I personally thought that was a great preferred site because of the reasons that it's.
I remember that.
You know, it was like really near the 3-phase and all that, and it was, yeah, it had a lot of those, you know, reasons in it, and but then it went on to the Planning Commission and all that, and things changed, you know. Planning Commission looked at it and did whatever they did,
You know,
and then
you don't recall why they changed or how they changed?
no, I know they changed a lot of things when it
Can't
went
hear
there.
you, Sally.
I don't know why that might have changed, or that it may not have actually, even though we talked about it, we may not have, you know, we weren't to that place. And then at some
But
point,
whatever the case, there was some reason why that was changed. And it seems to me
I don't
quite
know if it,
possible
I-
that they just looked at it not from a purely, can we build a solar array here, but rather from what are the needs of the town, taking into account
that could be,
a bigger picture than just can a solar field be built.
yes,
And you know,
I think
I'm
that's,
not
true.
opposed to solar fields, and I'm not opposed to this one necessarily, but I do feel like, you know, building renewable energy has become, you know, at the expense of all other things. I mean, towns barely get a say in the PUC's deliberations on these. So
Okay.
all of the other values of a town in the plan or anywhere else, really, that's what my beef is. It's not with
Yeah.
a solar field.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah,
So I'm wondering, Steve, I wonder if we contact Andrew down at the Regional Planning Commission.
Yeah.
If he's got any background on that. I was part of that early stage and I can't remember why that was removed from the designation preferred sites. Do you think Andrew would be able to give us a hand on that, Sally?
I do. I think he might know. He was
Yeah.
part of it, and maybe even someone on the Planning Commission would know what that is. But I
Maybe,
think Andrew was
yeah.
certainly a big part of that process, and he would probably know. Yeah, I can talk to Andrew.
So should we defer right now, delay any kind of action until we answer that?
Yeah, I think that sounds wise.
I don't think there's any reason for us to exist unless when we're given information, we take a position. And why would we go through all this if we're not going to either recommend or not recommend or whatever? I thought that was our role.
Right, and I think that's true, but maybe we can't do that in one meeting. Maybe we
Yeah,
need to look
yeah,
into it in more detail.
Yeah, I don't think we ought to rush it.
Yeah.
So let's get the information and then bring back.
Yeah.
But I think we ought to either recommend for or against.
Okay. So I'll talk to Andrew about it, and we can also we can talk to a planning commission person, or we can look at the NEAT TV recordings, although, yeah, some kind of thing like that. I think Andrew would be able to point to when there was a discussion about it, and we could learn more about that discussion, if there was a discussion about that. Yeah.
It would also be helpful to know if the planning commission has looked at this and what their attitude toward it is.
Yeah, right. What do they
Are
feel
they in
about that
support?
piece of
I mean,
land? I think that's
Yeah,
important.
I mean,
Yeah,
that would go to some of what Steve is talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of use. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. If they see a higher use of somebody coming in and putting in a low-income housing complex that would serve the community, bring in residents, children for our schools and things like that.
yeah.
Yeah, we ought to know that.
Stephen, did you have any other use thoughts that might happen there?
No,
Okay,
no, but how can we know what they are? I haven't read the town plan. I know there are a variety, at
Yeah.
least I believe there are. So
Yeah.
but I think unless people in the community are being proactive about pursuing those possible uses, then this is what happens.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying I wish there was more of a dialogue about
Yeah.
this.
Yeah, it sounds good. It sounds important. All right, so we'll look into it more. And maybe it's even, I'll talk to Andrew, and then maybe it's even go to a planning commission meeting and ask them about it and see what they think, or something like that.
I guess.
See what their plans are. Yeah. I mean, we can also look in the town plan and probably read exactly what they wrote in there and learn what might be thought about for planning. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice that we're going to benefit maybe $12,000 a year in property taxes, but that's not a lot of money. And in exchange for that, we are losing the ability to, it's not at the town's land.
Right.
So, but it does close off other possible uses of that property for 25 years at least.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead. You can, whatever.
No?
else.
Yeah, I'm speaking more like a planner now, and I apologize for
That's
that,
okay.
because I do recognize the energy benefits. I understand the need for renewable energy and all that too, but yeah,
Hey,
kind of took off my energy out here.
well, it's great. I'm glad you are on this energy committee. And you could also, in addition to being on the energy committee, you could be on the planning commission, because they're looking for more people.
Yeah.
But don't leave us as an energy committee person, because we like you here too.
Right.
Well,
Right.
but I understand. Maybe that's your next job. Who knows?
No, it isn't. It
Okay.
isn't.
All right.
No.
I think it's good to think about all this. Yeah. We want the best for Bristol.
So
And
Sally,
the-
I've got to sign out.
Okay, let's wrap it up. I think we've got
Yep.
it down. All right. Well, thanks everyone for being here and listening
you.
and asking
Thanks
questions.
for organizing that.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Good to
Yeah,
see you all.
welcome.
Good to see you.
So long.
All right,
long.
bye-bye. Oh, I gotta stop the recording.